President Lee Jae-myung presided over an open debate at the UN Security Council in New York, becoming the first South Korean president to chair such a session. The discussions focused on the need for international cooperation in order to address emerging threats posed by artificial intelligence. Also in New York, President Lee met with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent as the two countries continue to work to finalize details of their trade deal. Lee highlighted South Korea's pledged $350 billion investment package, a key part of their negotiations to lower U.S. tariffs. We begin in New York, where President Lee Jae-myung chaired a UN Security Council open debate for the responsible use of artificial intelligence, a first for any South Korean leader. This was a reflection of the growing need to address the issue together with the international community. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports from New York.
In a time of emerging technology coupled with growing uncertainty, an international dialogue on AI took place at a major platform for multilateral diplomacy. As chair of a UN Security Council open debate, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung started off the session by explaining the significance of the gathering.
오늘날 인공지능 기술의 발전은 우리의 일상을 변화시키는 것을 넘어 국제적인 안보 환경까지 급격하게 변화시키고 있습니다. 이제 인공지능이라는 새로운 위협과 도전에 걸맞는 새로운 거버넌스를 모색해야 될 때입니다.
South Korea assumed the rotating presidency of the UN Security Council this month, and Lee is the first South Korean president to preside over the debate as chair. Drawing a parallel between AI and a tiger cub, President Lee urged the need to use AI to benefit humanity, not to harm it. He called for international unity to uphold the principle of responsible use of AI and emphasized the role of the Security Council, as well as Korea's contribution.
대한민국은 글로벌 책임 강국으로서 AI가 인류의 지속 가능한 미래를 만드는 훌륭한 도구가 될 수 있도록 국제사회와의 협력을 주도하는 길에 앞장설 것입니다.
The wake-up call was echoed by world leaders, including the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, noting the recent establishment of an international scientific panel on AI and a global dialogue on AI governance by the General Assembly.
I will soon launch an open call for nominations for the scientific panel. I also call on governments and stakeholders to engage fully in the global dialogue and to shape inclusive, human rights-based global norms.
Wednesday's session was organized under the theme of artificial intelligence and international peace and security. More international discussions on the future of AI will be held next month, when South Korea hosts the APEC leaders meeting in the city of Gyeongju. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, New York.
So as President Lee Jae-myung became the first Korean leader to chair a United Nations Security Council debate, he spotlighted Korea's efforts to put artificial intelligence at the center of global security discussions. Our Oh Soo-young explains more.
Setting the agenda on artificial intelligence, South Korea is leading the global discussion on how to govern its risks and implications. President Lee Jae-myung's chairing of the United Nations Security Council open debate on Wednesday highlights the country's efforts to set universal standards on the all-pervasive technology, as rapid advances in AI presents both opportunities and challenges for international peace and security. This comes crucially at a time when larger powers are divided in geopolitical tension and rivalry, according to international relations expert Park Won-gon.
In this kind of a context, our President Lee Jae-myung's leading role in the AI is very important because we could not see any kind of continuity dialogue about how to restrain, limit the AI because AI is such a powerful mean and powerful mechanism to change the human histories.
Seoul hosted the AI Safety Summit last year, bringing leaders together to establish that progress in AI should empower humanity. The Seoul Declaration sets out safety, innovation and inclusion as key pillars in AI development and calls for collaboration among countries, firms, academia and civil society to cultivate democratic AI ecosystems. In doing so, 16 global AI tech companies, including Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Meta, and OpenAI, signed the Frontier AI Safety Commitments, which feature risk management, transparency, and accountability. On the security front, South Korea co-hosted 2 summits with the Netherlands on responsible AI in the military domain to develop global frameworks for the ethical application of AI in defense amid growing cyber and hybrid warfare. The 2 countries last year jointly tabled the first ever resolution on military AI, which was adopted with overwhelming support from 165 countries. Going forward, South Korea will once again host a global discussion among world leaders and CEOs at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting in Gyeongju next month. According to the Foreign Ministry, Korea is drafting the APEC AI initiative, which will outline a shared regional vision on innovation-driven growth, strengthening capacity for AI transformation, and encouraging sustainable investment in AI infrastructure. The Foreign Ministry said Wednesday, building on the Yi administration's vision of contributing to a global AI-based society, Seoul will continue to participate in multilateral discussions as a leading country in global AI governance. 오수영, Arirang News.
So, as we just heard, President Lee presided over the UN Security Council's open debate, becoming the first South Korean leader to chair a session at the Council. For more on this, we're joined today by Dr. Han Shattle, Professor of Political Science at Yonsei University. Professor Shattle, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, Angie. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So today's debate mainly focused on the emerging threats of artificial intelligence. What's your overall assessment of President Lee's message during the debate?
I thought strategically it was an important and really interesting theme to emphasize, Angie. I mean, we all know, of course, that AI is an important security issue globally, worldwide. It's something that faces all humanity in fairly equal terms. It's not something that's divided in groups of countries. You know, there is a need, I think, as the president said, for a human-centric AI, one that humans can flourish and be enriched by as being controlled or dominated by. So the speech does call attention, I think, to that larger context that AI can either be enriching or disruptive, actually. And it also is fairly consistent, I think, if you're thinking about this from a domestic politics point of view or domestic economics point of view. It's an area where South Korea might also have some competitive advantage, too, on the technological side and on the diplomatic side. Last year, predating the Lee administration, South Korea hosted a summit that was themed on the responsible use of AI in the military domain. So there's a whole variety of areas that are of interest, I think, and not just to the Lee administration, but also, as we can see, across Korean society. So that was projected within this meeting today, I thought, in interesting ways.
Right, absolutely. And President Lee became the first South Korean president to preside over the UN Security Council meeting. You know, this comes as South Korea assumes the presidency of the Council. What significance does this carry?
Right. It was fortuitous for President Lee, I think, in this case. The presidency, as you may know, rotates month by month. And it's not often that a country, at the same time as it's rotating into the presidency, manages to also have that coincide with the UN General Assembly annual sessions in September, where the world leaders all descend on New York. So it was actually just very lucky timing, I think, for Lee Jae-myung to have that rotation coincide. So a very long way for somebody, you know, who was the mayor of Songnam not so long ago, primarily a local and provincial politician who's moved up very quickly, and here he is on the world stage. So kind of meteoric rise for Lee Jae-myung. Part of that personal drama and symbolism, I think, was very much on display today.
Right, and speaking at the UN General Assembly before that debate, President Lee also said he'll ease tensions with North Korea. What's your take on his initiative? And with Kim Jong-un recently hinting at sort of willingness to meet with Donald Trump, do you think we will see Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump meet again as they did in Trump's first term in office?
Right, and this is the cliffhanger. And of course, this goes back to President Lee Jae-myung's speech at the full General Assembly, as well as some statements he was making earlier in an interview to the BBC at the beginning of the week. So as we all know, Kim Jong-un has shunned diplomacy with South Korea as well as the United States ever since the summits that took place in the first Trump presidency several years ago. Ended up not producing any kind of agreement. And Kim has gone more in the direction of Vladimir Putin from Russia and Xi Jinping from China of late. He met with both of those not long ago. And the question now that Kim Jong-un said at the beginning of this week that he's interested now or has good memories of talking to Trump and is willing perhaps to have another chat with Trump, provided, though, that the U.S. dropped the demand of denuclearization of North Korea's nuclear weapons program. And that's been South Korean policy as well. So President Lee said at the beginning of this week that he would be receptive to having a cap on North Korea's nuclear weapons program, or kind of freeze basically on its program, rather than denuclearization in the near term. And the goal of denuclearization could be pushed back to a longer term objective. And this also came out in his speech at the UN this week. President Lee was speaking, as you see in the video there. So the U.S. side has not yet weighed in on this. We can kind of surmise that President Trump might be eager to have a round of diplomacy again with Kim Jong-un. President Trump, in his speech at the UN General Assembly, made it, I think, very clear. He said he didn't care about a Nobel Peace Prize, but he seems to be looking for any way that he could pick one up. So I'm sure that President Trump will be considering the possibility, at least, of having a meeting with Kim Jong-un sometime soon. And President Lee Jae-myung seems willing to think about adjusting the policy, but that would be a very big step. Pushing denuclearization further back and having that kind of talk with North Korea would be, in a sense, making a very big concession to North Korea. That's a concession that was not made the last time the U.S. and North Korea had the earlier round of summits in the first Trump presidency. So I think South Korea and the U.S. really have to think further about what they want to ask from North Korea as a precondition for talks, and then figure out how those talks might develop from there. So there'll be a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiations, and we'll see how the U.S. chooses to play with the cards that it may be dealt with.
Right, we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Dr. Shah, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your time and insight. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you for having me, Angie. Take care.
And also in New York on Wednesday, President Lee Jae-myung met with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to discuss ongoing trade negotiations between South Korea and the United States. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin, who's traveling with the president, joins us live with the details. Yoo-jin, tell us more.
Well, first of all, good morning, Angie. Although it started raining here in New York, so to get straight to the point, President Lee and U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who is one of the leading voices of the Trump administration's tariff strategy, met for about half an hour on Wednesday afternoon at South Korea's permanent mission to the United Nations. Now, afterward, President Lee's policy chief Kim Yong-bom briefed reporters on what was discussed. So according to Kim, President Lee focused on South Korea's pledged $350 billion investment package, which is a key part of negotiations to reduce U.S. tariffs on South Korean imports. Now, we know that trade talks between the two countries have stalled over how that package should be structured. So according to many sources, Washington is pushing for most of the investment to be made in cash, while South Korea is preferring the investment to be made through loans and guarantees to really help ease its financial burden. Take a listen.
President Lee said he hopes the negotiations will move forward based on commercial rationality and in a way that benefits both countries. He also explained that South Korea differs significantly from Japan in terms of economic scale, foreign exchange reserves, and financial infrastructure, factors he hopes will be considered.
Now, for a bit of a context, Washington is hoping South Korea could make an investment package deal heavily dependent on cash, which is similar to the deal that it reached with Japan. But for a bit of a more context, $350 billion would account for more than 80% of South Korea's foreign exchange reserves. Japan, by contrast, holds more than double that amount and maintains a currency swap line with the United States. So because of that gap, President Lee has voiced concerns that a heavily equity-based investment without safeguards, such as a currency swap, will raise risks for South Korea. Chief of Policy Kim also said that Secretary Besson responded by promising to discuss those concerns with the relevant agencies. Now, while acknowledging the urgency of striking a deal, especially as South Korea's auto exports continue to face 25% U.S. tariffs compared to 15% for Japan following Tokyo's deal with Washington, the policy chief again stressed that Seoul aims to conclude a mutually beneficial, rational, and a deal that is in the national interest. Now, I also want to mention that Lee and Besson were set to hold a one-on-one during Thursday's South Korea Investment Summit, but their meeting was moved up to today due to Besson having a scheduling conflict.
I see. And Eugene, before I let you go, tell us about the South Korea Investment Summit on Thursday.
Right, so at the event, we expect President Lee to really outline his administration's economic policy direction and most of all, encourage more active investment in South Korea to boost investor confidence and just international confidence in South Korea's domestic economy. Now, we've heard from Lee's National Security Advisor Wee Sung-rak that heavyweight financiers as well as business leaders from both countries are expected to attend the event in Thursday in Manhattan. Now, after that, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung will return home on Friday. Back to you, NT.
All right, thank you for that, Eugene. Do keep us updated. And Washington says it's pushing ahead with a major liquefied natural gas project in Alaska and is now in talks with South Korean and Japanese companies and other firms in Asia to secure investment. According to U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright on Wednesday, the $40 billion project should begin within the next 12 months. Wright highlighted the short shipping routes to key U.S. allies, saying that the gas will be competitively priced with other LNG sources. The project is a centerpiece of U.S. President Donald Trump's push for what he calls America's energy dominance.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Starting in the Middle East, a Houthi drone strike has wounded more than 20 people in Israel's Red Sea resort city of Eilat. Local officials say the drone launched from Yemen on Wednesday evening struck near a hotel and shopping area, causing structural damage. At least 22 people were injured, including 2 in critical condition. Israel's Air Force attempted an interception but failed to hit the drone. Authorities launched an investigation into the failure. The Houthis claimed responsibility, stating the strike successfully achieved its objectives. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz wished a full recovery to those injured in the strike and added that anyone who harms Israel will be harmed sevenfold. At a United Nations climate summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping has pledged that by 2035, China will cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 7 to 10% from their peak levels. Addressing a climate leaders event hosted alongside the UN General Assembly in New York via live video on Wednesday local time, Xi said that the new emissions reduction goal is part of China's updated national determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. He also outlined China's supporting commitments, including the expansion of installed wind and solar capacity to 3,600 gigawatts, which is over 6 times 2020 levels, and an increase in non-fossil fuels to more than 30% of total energy consumption by 2035. In his remarks, Xi criticized some countries for backing away from their climate commitments. The summit comes a day after U.S. President Donald Trump said climate change was a con job. In the United States, the return of Jimmy Kimmel's show after suspension broke viewership records on Tuesday. ABC reported 6.26 million viewers tuned in, marking the show's strongest ratings in over a decade. On social media and digital platforms, Kimmel's comeback monologue gathered over 26 million views. Kimmel addressed critics head-on, clarified earlier remarks, gave a defense of free speech, and pushed back against pressure from President Trump. Finally, Dutch gene therapy company Unicure and University College London announced on Wednesday that their experimental gene therapy has successfully slowed the progression of Huntington's disease, a rare inherited brain disorder, by 75% over 3 years. The therapy works by delivering a modified virus into the brain to silence the mutant gene that causes neuronal damage. Unicure will apply for a license for the first ever treatment drug in the U.S. early next year.
Unlike yesterday, rain is expected across the Chungcheongdo provinces and southern regions today, with heavier rain in the forecast for the Jeollado provinces. They could see up to 80 millimeters, while Gyeongsangdo provinces might get 5 to 40 millimeters. Skies will clear in the capital area and Gangwon-do province, where the rain has already stopped. So temperatures will jump to as high as 28 degrees Celsius here in Seoul, and southern regions will also notice highs going down a couple degrees, but not that much. And this afternoon, Daegu and Gwangju will make it to 27 degrees. Jeju will be pretty warm at 31 degrees. Looking ahead, rain will return to southern regions in Jeju tomorrow and possibly rain through Saturday. Then there will be nationwide rain on Sunday. Once this final system clears, temperatures will drop and it will feel much cooler, welcoming October.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.